For many people, building a house is seen as the ultimate measure of success. They meticulously go through the phases of home building, designing something that is perfect, securing the relevant permits, building the foundation, ensuring the walls, roof, beams, and columns are structurally sound, all before selecting the right furniture, fixtures, and fittings. But what happens when the house that is being built isn't just for you? It isn't for your family, village, or community. No, this house is for an entire territory. How can this seemingly insurmountable feat be achieved? Building this extraordinary house requires a strategic plan, firm foundation, the right fixtures and fittings, and adequate structural support. Indeed, the house that Mathavious was going to build needed to be remarkable. And seeing that God is a BVI lander, divine intervention would allow everything to align seamlessly. Robert Mathavious was responsible for building a house that would seek to benefit the Virgin Islands, a 58 square mile British overseas territory in the Caribbean that is made up of 60 islands, islets, and keys. A house that would not only withstand the test of time, but also withstand earthquakes, floods, catastrophic hurricanes, other natural disasters, international threats, scandals, leaks of information, changes in government, laws, international standards, systems, you name it. The house that Mathavious built withstood it. Financial services. This is the house that Mathavious built. When Charles and Vesey Mathavious welcomed their son Robert into the world, they had no idea they would be grooming a Virgin Islander who would make significant contributions towards the development of the place he called home. The fourth child for his mother and sixth for his father would be shaped by the values and upbringing of a Virgin Islands of simpler times.
Mommy was a housewife. Daddy was almost like the millennial man, because Daddy did a multiplicity amount of things. His main job was as a foreman for J.R. O'Neill, hardware, general store, every single thing. But he did all kinds of things on the side. He was a mason, a carpenter, a tailor. he did bookkeeping on the side for some people. And he had a very, in his younger years, he was the paymaster for public works. He used to walk from West End to East End, paying, get up early in the morning, doing the payload. And he used to do something which was unusual, was the scales which were used to weigh animals, because in those days they used to ship animals out. He was the only person who could have put that scale together and set it up.
As a young Robert began to explore his lower estate Huntamsgut community in Rowtown where he grew up, something happened which saw him and his older brother Roger contracting an infection of the intestines, which would take them to death's borderlands too many times to count.
Very sick. So sick that no one really thought that he would live. He was quiet. He was hospitalized for an extended period of time. But then after he got out and got well, he was just like any other normal child. He was a bit on the quiet side, but had a funny sense of humor.
Despite the health challenges that he faced in his youth, Robert would take this sense of humor and zest throughout his educational journey, which began in 1957.
I think in 1957, my education started at what was then St. George's infant school. From there, I went to the Rowtown Primary, and and to the Virgin Islands Secondary School, the forerunner of the BVI High School, which only about 25 people at the most, 20 to 25 people used to get in every year. So it was a very, very competitive environment to get in and to stay in there. So that's where my formative education began. Until 1968, when the Virgin Islands Comprehensive School took over.
It was during his years at the Virgin Islands Secondary School that he developed a love for sports, and the people around him began to get a glimpse into the man and leader he would ultimately become.
He loved sports. I think you know that he was our high jump star in high school, and that stayed with him, his love of sports.
He, in his day, was one of the BVI top high jumpers and 400-meter runners.
He was very involved in sports. He was a very popular student. He had a wide network of friends, studied hard and worked hard, and was known for his abilities and for the great potential that he had. But he also played hard. He also played hard and was a popular, well-liked student.
He says that he saw my name popping up as contributing points to the house, because you used to contribute points to the house in various ways. It wasn't just sports, academics and participating in other activities. But he said just as I was putting on the points, I was taking them off for bad behavior. So he wanted to find out why that was happening, and I think that's from way back then. That's when our friendship started.
At high school, it was a new type of experience, because now for the first time you were having teachers teaching you by subject and things like that. For the first 4 years, I wasted time. I stayed back in Form 4, and it's ironic because I seem to have always been friends with the people who I stayed back with. So they don't even realize that they caught me. And in the Form 4, when I repeated Form 4, I suddenly became one of the best students in the school. And I was inspired by teachers like Anthony Lane. There's some Bajan teachers who had just come. Anthony Lane taught us English. Carol Mapp taught us chemistry. Gerald Rose, maths. And those three teachers, more than anything else, had a profound impact on me, and have been the cause of where I am today.
But despite being the sports star of the school and maintaining good relationships with other students, Robert struggled to perform academically. Despite the academic challenges that he faced, Robert remained persistent because of the teachers who had an impact on his life.
My father was so surprised when Robert aced all his GCEs, when Daddy didn't think he would make it. But he was applying himself, just that we didn't know, because you saw him in books, you weren't sure what he was doing. So Robert had a good memory. He was able to concentrate on what he needed to and still have his fun at the same time. And the end result was that he passed with flying colors, much to everybody's surprise.
We always knew that something great would come out of him because of his curiosity and so on. Or I should say, we always felt there'd be something great coming out of him.
My parents always knew that I had lots of ability, but they also considered me to be a very stubborn boy who will do what he wanted to do. And I believe they've become exasperated. They said, okay, well, stay back, let us see what he does. And my father was always very, very supportive in terms of books. Whatever book you needed, he would get for you and things like that.
Robert was successful in completing his high school education, a significant accomplishment at that time, as most young people were not awarded the opportunity to receive higher education. Following his success at satisfying the school-leaving requirements, Robert would further construct his foundation by seeking tertiary education at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus in Barbados. The continuation of this academic pursuit would bolster the advancements that he had made previously and confirm Chief Minister Hamilton Laverty Stout's commitment to support the scholastic development of Virgin Islanders.
At that time, UWI was the only place that the government was giving scholarships. Laverty Stout had come whilst we were in school and had decided that if we make the minimum, as long as you make the minimum requirement, a scholarship is guaranteed. So therefore, I went and I made the minimum requirement and I got a scholarship. Interestingly, I made the minimum. I didn't make anything over that. Like I said, I went to University of the West Indies. At the time I went to University of the West Indies, for students, it was a time of romanticism, because what was happening was that all throughout the Caribbean, the Union Jack was coming down. New nations were being born, and their new flags were created. So the University of the West Indies was extremely concerned with producing a graduate who would be a law-abiding citizen of the Caribbean, a very, very focused on developing the Caribbean, trying to make sure that everything he did was about giving back to the country and to the taxpayers who had financed his education and so forth. So when I went to university, I was basically trying to find out who I was, what I wanted to do. At that time, I thought I wanted to be a pharmacist. And I was actually already admitted to go to Canada to study pharmacy. But because we don't do A-levels, I had to go to Barbados to do the equivalent of A-levels. Now, A-levels, you do them in 2 years. I had to do them in 1 year, including I had to do a subject I had never, ever heard anything of before, physics. Don't ask me how I passed it, but I needed to have these things. They got them done.
Following the completion of his A-levels in Barbados, Robert returned to the Virgin Islands excited to move on to the next phase of his academic development in hopes of becoming a pharmacist. This move didn't go as planned, but Robert did not allow this setback to deter him. Instead, he used the knowledge he had received from the University of the West Indies and became employed at the Virgin Islands Secondary School as an assistant teacher and lab assistant.
I came back to the BVI having satisfied all the requirements, only to be told that they were not giving me the scholarship to go on to Canada. They wanted me to go to a little school in Jamaica called CAST, where I would have learned to mix drugs, but nothing else. Once again, I refused. I stayed home.
At that time, I was looking at the qualities that would have been, say, appropriate for the job that he was going to be doing. Like, he was reliable and friendly. Well, of course, he was knowledgeable, and he was approachable, and he had a good rapport with the young people and the staff and so forth. I think he had tremendous promise for growth, which I perceived, and I think because I had perceived that potential, I think it was one of the reasons that I probably thought that if he were interested in pursuing teaching, it would give him an opportunity to test it before he really would have made up his mind. So, but I knew he had potential for growth in whatever direction he would choose to change his life.
Following his stint as assistant teacher and lab assistant, Robert would then be given another scholarship opportunity to further his studies once again at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, where divine intervention would have its way, and as the saying goes, the rest is history.
When I stayed home, the long story was eventually I got a scholarship offer And I looked and I saw something, I didn't even know what it was. Economics. I selected economics. And the next thing you know, I was the best economics student at the university. Had no clue what it was. I just did not want to teach. I did not want to do certain things, and this seemed as if it would be a way of getting me there.
Robert went off to University of the West Indies in Keyville campus, and when I graduated from high school in 1976, in June 1976, I was headed off to Keyville campus in September of that year, and was all because of Robert engineering, basically. Well, of course I did my academics, but it was all because of he engineering my own, pathway to go to Keyville. In fact, we traveled on the same flights. Same flight to Barbados. It was him, Everett O'Neill, and myself. We went to Barbados, and Robert and I was actually roommates when I went to Keyville for the year. So my first year at Keyville was his final year at university.
He also played hard and was a popular, well-liked student. And many of his friends became my friends and became the friends of us from the Virgin Islands who were at the University of the West Indies together at the time.
I don't think I was here at that time. But when I would come back on weekends to visit, when I started living in the Virgin Islands first, and I would come back to visit, I look at the type of books that he had. I look at material that he was listening to, and I knew that his thinking was changing. I couldn't tell you in what direction, but I knew that he was more serious than he used to be.
With a new perspective of what it meant to be a good citizen of the Caribbean, Robert was confident in the foundation that he managed to build and would leave the security that the Cave Hill campus afforded him, bound for the Virgin Islands with his Bachelor of Science in Economics in hand, eager to make his contribution towards the development of the territory. Once at home, Mathavious' house would begin to see the constructing of the walls and columns, as he would now enter the public service, where he would be given the opportunity to make significant strides towards the creation of a world-class public service.
After the degree, I then reported to the statistics office where as I said, I came in the helicopter. I never had a boss. I came in on top. So I didn't learn a number of things, and I was a bit typical, student just come back from university, particularly University of the West Indies, which at that time was very, very dogmatic about trying to prepare us to be responsible citizens of the Caribbean. You had a little bit of sharp edge, and it rubbed a number of people the wrong way.
Mr. Mathavious, one of those young men who had a lot of, wanted to do a lot of things. And those older guys, the politicians and stuff, they used to call them a set of upstarts. That's how they used to describe them, as the upstart. But we just let that pass by and say they don't even know what they want to say. But we all will get together and prove them different. That the upstarts, as you think they were all of us were. We're just trying to bring a new perspective to the way the civil service does business. And there's a hand not to sell sometimes, even now. It was known, and in my own personal view, accepted that we had a lot to offer. And yes, it's as old as time, this tension between the old and the young. I think Shakespeare has written meaningfully about that. But I think by sheer dint of our performances, the fact that it became clear that we had no personal agenda, our view and our goals were national.
An Englishman had the job. So I was the first local to have the job. So I had, in a number of things, when I took over, the Englishman left. So I had to One of my very first and most important tasks was the 1980 population census. I think it was the last time a census was done where the totals, the census count was known within a matter of weeks, and the census report was available in a short number of months.
He always believed in excellence. Don't come to Robert with anything that's half done, halfway done. That was one thing. It had to be done at an international standard that you could stand up everywhere, globally.
The public service of the territory was in its infancy stage, and this saw a number of changes being made by its leaders to allow for its advancement. Perhaps it was divine intervention, or sheer coincidence, doing the right things with the right people, as Robert puts it, that created the opportunity for him to receive yet another promotion, this time to the Deputy Financial Secretary position following the elections of 1979.
I happened to be in the right place at the right time, maybe doing the right things with the right people. But what happened was that following the election of 1979, there were a number of changes. And there's a man who has been very, very instrumental in pulling moves around my life, lawyer McWillan Todman. He was the one who made sure that I got the scholarship to go and do the economics. And when I came back, I remember at the end of 1979, he called me one day and he told me that the country was in trouble. It needed 2 posts to be filled: Deputy Financial Secretary and Manager of the Development Bank. I was trained to do both. Which will I take? And I took the Ministry of Finance. And but Mac has always been very much instrumental in my life in making sure that I stay on the right track and things like that.
By this time, people like Cyril, right? He had retired from financial secretary, and now he was in the political, right? So no, he had a zest and zeal too to get the finance going and working towards having a locally appointed financial secretary, because that was one of the last lingering ones to have white position, the financial secretary. And he would insist that's not going to happen, so he began to put things like place. Robert came from DPU, came into finance, and the financial secretary there was Kenneth Bain.
Kenneth Bain, the financial secretary before me, was very, very instrumental in polishing my rough edges and in giving me full flight to do the things that were necessary.
The house that Mathavious was building was once again seeing structural developments being made. These developments would allow for Robert's professional advancement yet again, and the advancement of the territory by extension. Robert was now the financial secretary, the government's chief financial advisor to the Minister of Finance, overseeing the budgetary administration to ensure proper financial control.
When I went into the Ministry of Finance, I was now in a position where I could start applying some of those economic theories, etc. You see, I had been in Barbados at a formative time when the transition from Prime Minister Errol Barrow to Prime Minister Tom Adams. And it was a sharp contrast between the two men. I used to just marvel when Tom Adams gave a budget, how every single person in Barbados would be listening on the radio. And if he says, tomorrow at the pump, gas will go up 10 cents, you'll see cars heading to every single gas station to make sure that they get their last fill of cheap gas. So I was very, very much at the time of development concerns. I wanted to see BVI come better.
This was very important to what was then a young and upcoming public service. He really believed in training. He believed in finding talent, and he believed in the development of what he would refer to as a world-class public service. He didn't want to see us being like the country or island or public service next door. He wanted us to be able to compete with people in the UK, people in China, people in the United States, everywhere.
The permanent secretaries are the seasoned civil servants. Didn't think that this young upstart boy should get the job of financial secretary. I remember one of the first things I did in preparing for the budget, a practice that still happens. I wrote all the permanent secretaries, advising them that I was preparing the budget address and things like that, and I would welcome contributions from them to say what will be the thrust of the activities in their ministry. I got no answer, but I loved that because it meant I could write what I wanted. So could you imagine budget day? A number of them come, and I believe they came expecting to see me fall down on my face. And they heard this fantastic budget speech being read by Cyril Romney. And they heard fantastic things come out of what its ministry was doing. Now they couldn't turn around and say they had not give any suggestions or they hadn't contributed. So they had to just take the glory, and maybe they looked at me different ever since.
I don't ever remember having a what I would call a real difference with Mr. Mac, as we call him. And I tended to have differences with everybody. I got fairly strong views about things. And I don't remember any issue that we kind of locked horns on. I think to a large extent, in those days, the rules were clear, things were fairly strict. You did what you had to do, and you did it right because you know that there could be consequences. And we cooperated, we didn't quarrel with each other.
I also had a very interesting thing that when I used to act as deputy governor also. And sometimes, the deputy governor has always been a whipping boy for the politicians. And sometimes I was being in the very invidious position of a minister telling me, financial secretary, I want you to speak to the deputy governor and tell the deputy governor this. Whilst the other one is saying, deputy governor, you tell that financial secretary. It just, so I was schizophrenic.
At this point in Virgin Islands history, things were rapidly changing, and leaders like Robert were forced to keep up with the changes that were happening around the world, or running the risk of becoming stuck with a country that was stagnant and lacking the necessary infrastructure and systems needed to be considered progressive. One such change that many countries began to see was the use of business-friendly tax structures to attract foreign investment. These were called tax havens, which wasn't the pejorative term it is today. Tax havens was the policy of the developed world.
Interestingly, because of double taxation treaties, countries who had double taxation treaties with the developed world, like BVI, didn't have any form of secrecy, because the whole purpose of the double taxation treaty was to make sure that you paid tax, if you paid tax in the lower tax jurisdiction, such as the BVI. The developed country who had a higher tax would not charge you tax at that high rate on the income, the profits, or whatever that you have already paid tax on in the lower countries. So the BVI determined to capitalize on its networks of treaties and become a tax haven, a low tax haven, by the way, not a no tax haven, a tax haven based on utilization of the double taxation treaties in which information on tax paid was shared between us and the developed country. Interestingly, around 1979, 78, etc., when I started becoming aware of these type of things and looking at it, the BVI's budget, I believe in 1979, don't quote me, was either $8 million or $7 million. Interestingly, because of the double taxation treaty in January of each year, we used to get a check of $1 million. Remember, our budget was $7 million or $8 million. We used to get a check of $1 million from the Winston-Salem Corporation. Anyone knows that corporation? Winston-Salem cigarettes. They were using a special provision in the tax code where if a company self-declared, I think it was its global income, it could pay, I believe, 0.5% of that. If it's self-declared, it would pay it by a certain date. So every January, we would get a check of over $1 million, which would fund the government for a long while. But during the late 70s, attitudes within the developed world to tax havens began to change. As a result, most of the double taxation treaties that were extended to the BVI were abrogated by the OECD countries themselves. Some of these having proved to be of little or no value to us in the BVI, as they were never ever used. By 1979, the only meaningful one left to the BVI was the one with the United States. That was the one that Winston-Salem used to use. Just as companies started to take notice of the treaty and were really beginning to register and incorporate and establish BVI operations in order to benefit under this treaty, the United States government announced its intentions of renegotiating all its double taxation treaties with tax havens. This was largely as a result of US concerns about what they called treaty shopping by residents of third countries who piggybacked on the treaties to establish their own operations and companies and other structures within these poor developing countries.
We used to have all these double taxation treaties with the United States. President Carter, just before he left office, he signed and renewed all the agreements. And when Mr. Ronald Reagan took over and he was sworn in January of 1980, canceled everyone, which put us in a tailspin. Because if you didn't have those double taxation treaties, it meant that the companies couldn't come here and do business. And that meant that more than 50% of our revenue was going. And that's where the challenges came in for us. And to get that going and stuff and what have you, that's when the company registries came in. We had to take the lead, of course. Robert and whoever FS and stuff was there then, under Kenneth Bain, he was deputy, to get the IBC Act so we could get companies coming and registering and don't have to go through the USA, because Reagan canceled it. That was sad times. Because in those days we used to look forward to those companies, especially that bring in revenue. One such one I will never forget, the Salem Cigarette Company. At the beginning of the year when they come to do the taxes and stuff, everything we planned was around that. And we used to be getting checks of over $6 million at that time when your revenue budget is only like $18 million. You know, you plan everything around that. And when that canceled, we all went so. But we pick up the pieces. And that's where we are. With our buoyant financial services, first started with company registry.
Most people consider that the passage of 1984 IBC Act is when it started, but in fact, it started much longer before that, with the introduction of double taxation treaties that would have been used to build some of the landmark hospitality infrastructures that are around it, Little Spain and Bitter End and some things like that. And then move forward, when those double taxation treaties were cancelled, efforts were made to source other sources of directing capital investments and revenue for the government. And that's where the International Business Companies Act came into place. And then there were a couple of events that really propelled it. The US invasion of Panama, and then the handover of Hong Kong back to China. And on those two occasions, we saw exponential growth in BVI business companies, or international business companies as they were then called.
Overnight, the loss of revenue from the double taxation treaty that existed then literally forced the thinking, what are we going to do to be able to supplement the revenue that has been lost from this particular arena? And there's a gentleman by the name of Paul Butler, who was a lawyer working between the US and the BVI at the time, who came up with the idea. And for those who want to read about it, it's chronicled in Mr. Lewis Hunt's book, Memoirs of a Caribbean Lawyer, in which he gives a very succinct, detailed analysis of how the whole thing approached. So when you talk about the genesis of financial services, the purists would say that probably was the origin of the financial services.
So as Attorney General, I obviously was a member of it was called the Legislative Council at the time, and I was a member of the Executive Council. And as such, my role was a key role in terms of helping to develop the financial services sector, which of course Robert was heading up. And the history is well known. In 1984, the International Business Companies Act, as it was called at the time, was passed. And that really was the springboard, that was the foundation and the springboard for the development and growth of the financial services sector. And then came in the late 80s the developments in Panama, and that provided a great boost to the development of financial services here. And obviously, it was important that a proper legal infrastructure be built for the financial services. A lot of policy making was being done globally in relation to financial services. Locally, and it's important that I stress that, locally we were coming up with and devising some policies of our own that would underpin the financial services sector. So there was Robert dealing a lot with the policy making. There was I as Attorney General helping to inform the policy, helping to inform cabinet, helping to advise, seeing to the drafting of the legislation, seeing to the piloting of the legislation through the Legislative Council. It was a wonderful time. There were great opportunities for all of us and for our country.
I equally became quite famous at that time for a statement that God is a BVI lender. Because I used to say that we do a number of things, we advance a number of things in spite of ourselves. And it had to be that divine intervention, which I see in my life, which I see in a number of things, that it means that God was doing this because we did a number of things.
The International Business Companies Act was considered to be a very good mechanism for us to introduce, and that would be our, what should we say, ticket to success, if you want to call it that, diversification.
Financial services was on the rise, tourism was booming, and the economic viability of these industries seemed promising. For a little country that should have been nothing more than a bird sanctuary, things were different. Much different. The Virgin Islands was headed in the right direction, and although Robert felt that the territory was becoming too politically driven, he saw the great potential that existed on this side of history and prepared himself to ultimately lead the charge towards economic development and success. This preparation would see him leaving his position as financial secretary and allowing his deputy Glenroy Forbes to take over as he headed to Washington, D.C. to pursue an MBA at Georgetown University.
As a matter of fact, when financial services started to take off, and I was financial secretary and Glenroy Forbes was my deputy, my aim at that time was that Glenroy would have financial services whilst I remain financial secretary.
After we got to the point of we got the legislation and what have you to get everything going, right on the head of that, when we get into that moving point, he asked for sabbatical. He called it a sabbatical leave, but he went on study leave. But at that time, we called it a sabbatical because the powers that be put in a lot of pressure, and he just wanted a break. And Glenroy had just come in 87 as the deputy, so he went on study leave in Washington.
Mr. Mathavious, having become financial secretary, you would have thought that, well, that was it for him. There was no other place to go. So I remember being surprised when he said that he was going back to school, because I thought, well, you've become the financial secretary. What else is there to learn? Because in my mind, he knew everything. But he knew that there was more that he could learn. He knew that there was a greater contribution that he could make. So he made a decision to go to school, and the territory is better off as a result of that.
I said that I became disenchanted with the fact that the political influences on the Ministry of Finance and things like that. When you're in the civil service, you have to turn a blind eye to a number of things. You have to be silent on a number of things. You can't speak about what you know is true, because it will be that you're giving away official secrets and things like that. I also said that at that time, the older Mr. Stout was not as pleasant to work with as the younger Mr. Stout. Politics was becoming too, the territory was becoming too politically drawn, and I didn't want to be part of that. Yet to my chagrin, when I decided I would go on study leave and study management, do an MBA, I would always remember that I had told Mr. Stout that the reason I wouldn't do it before the election was I didn't want it to become a factor of the election. But to my chagrin, I heard a political campaign. My good old friend and cousin, Patsy Lake, was on the radio and on the brass drum, and she said, the government is so bad. They get the financial secretary so upset he's now going on frustrated study leave. No, she said frustration study leave. But no, I knew it was time, so that by the time my vision then was that financial services needed to be pulled out of the government, needed to become a much more autonomous and independent body for a variety of reasons, some of which I think was because the British government was trying to get too involved in what was happening locally, and as long as it was not within the government, they couldn't tell us exactly how to go about doing that.
And Robert saw where this country was going financially, and Robert prepared himself for what was to come, and it came, and Robert was ready to step in, and nobody can say he didn't do a good job.
Robert would attend Georgetown University and complete his MBA, and divine intervention would take him from his post as financial secretary and lead him down a different path. The house being built was starting to take form, and his eyes were now set on financial services.
When I came back, I had no intention of going back to be financial secretary or working as a civil servant again, and I started trying to steer towards the financial services. It took me another set of years before that became a reality, because I came back home in 1993, and it wasn't until 2001 that the Financial Services Commission Act was passed.
Robert returned home in the summer of, I think 1993 was the summer of 1993, after he had completed his MBA at Georgetown. And at that time, he held the substantial post of financial secretary. of the BVI. But he never went back to that office when he came home. They started the financial services department, himself and a secretary. It was then housed in the Abbott building, upstairs the Abbott building. That was just opposite the administration building on Main Street, right in front of the taxi stand there. That's where the department was housed, just the two of them. And as the saying goes, the rest of it is history.
Robert was now in the position of Director of the Financial Services Department. Knowing that this was only a transitionary move, he would begin to select the right fixtures and fittings in an effort to complete the house. The work that was being done now allowed the British Virgin Islands to be seen as a viable financial services jurisdiction by international counterparts.
I was involved in crafting the Financial Services Commission Act. I used my experience as financial secretary to see where I'd seen governance weaknesses in government, where I'd seen a number of things, to build those into the Financial Services Act. Then we made sure that the board that we had, that there was only people with certain skills could have gotten on the board, and including the fact that the board could not be very myopic, insular facing only on the BVI. We made sure that we had external people on the board to make sure we brought that international dimension. So with that, we were forced to have a number of private sector type of private sector calculus as to how we would be measured and things like that. And the transition was fairly easy.
I joined the then Financial Services Department in December of 2001 as part of the transition team that would see the department transition to the Financial Services Commission.
In 2000, when I became the Inspector of Banks and Trust Companies, at the time he was chair of this Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, which invariably meant that he did a lot of traveling, both for that and for the international initiatives that were ongoing at the time. And his deputy at the time, was Mrs. Lisa Penletson. But invariably, he had to work with him closely. And then as he came back and he briefed us on, what's happening on the international scene, and you get an appreciation for what's happening outside of the BVI that is impacting what's happening in the BVI.
Well, Mr. Mathavious, in my opinion, from the very beginning, always wanted to surround himself with persons who were capable, knowledgeable, experienced. He drew a lot on relationships in the international sector. He made sure to keep regular contact and relationships with other regulators, whether in OTs or other jurisdictions. And I think that he would agree that that was to the credit of him and for BVI, that he established the kind of relationships that allowed him to have, the sounding board and the support to do what he wanted to do for BVI.
Yes, I had the privilege of being assigned to the Financial Services Department's work and assignments by the then Attorney General, Tansel Penn. And that meant, obviously, I had a very close working relationship with Robert. And over the years, that relationship had continued, whereby I continued to work with Robert in and outside of government as well. But whilst I was in government, most certainly, I was specifically responsible for assisting the department in terms of their legislative measures. And Robert was a constant visitor to the Attorney General's chambers, always chasing up after his legislation and coming to discuss issues and how he thought that things might be done to develop the financial services industry in the British Virgin Islands.
It was 2002, and we were in a delegation from BVI was in Cayman. It was Mathavious, Mrs. Lorna Smith, Mr. Glenroy Forbes, Sylvia Moses, myself, and we had a consultant, Ben Coleman from the UK, who's a personal friend of all of us. And however, the rest of us got there early. Mathavious' flight was late, so he got in a bit later than the rest of us. And this was a huge meeting. This was when the OECD was basically putting pressures on all overseas finance centers, basically. And it was basically in relation to taxes, withholding taxes, tax information exchange agreements. And there were about 30 countries or more in the world represented at this forum. Probably more than that, actually, but I don't remember exactly. But the question was going around the room: what are we going to do? How are we going to choose? How are we going to decide what to do? The pressures are real. How do we deal with this? And this was the most troubling I've seen. And Mathavious calls me to say his flight has landed. He's on his way to the hotel. So I let everyone know. And on his way there, the questions are still going around the room. And this jurisdiction, I can't remember who it was, but for some reason I think it was the Kingdom of Bahrain. The representative stood up and said, let's all be real. We're all waiting to hear what Robert has to say before we make our decision. I sat there for a second and I tried to understand what just happened. Then, about 5 minutes later, Mathavious walks into the room. And everyone in the room, I'm talking over 300 people, stand up and start to clap at his presence. If you know Mathavious and how humble he is, he was embarrassed. Because that's not the kind of parade, celebration type stuff he likes. He likes to be humble in the corner, speak when he's spoken to. So, during that time, I saw Mathavious not lead only the charge for the BVI, but he led the charge for a lot of the other small countries in the world. And for me, 28 years old, seeing this, it was amazing to watch. So I say that to say he doesn't shy away from the pressures of international pressures, especially political pressures. He sticks to his guns. If Mathavious believes something, that's what he's gonna fight for.
When we first went to China and met with a number of persons in the banking sector, in the fiduciary sector, the chambers of commerce, and so on. And at the time, Robert, as I said, was our chief advisor, although the premier, the chief minister at the time, was the leader of the delegation. And so those were the formative days of financial services. As I said, he always believed in excellence. When we went to Hong Kong, we went armed with an article or articles done by the Financial Times. We had invited the Financial Times. We weren't always happy with what they put in the articles, but we invited the likes of the Financial Times. We always went high to come and do a piece, which we were able to utilize. And there was always that respect for the British Virgin Islands.
Professionally, Robert was progressing at a rapid pace. He was climbing the corporate ladder, and much of the success of the BVI's economic development was being attributed to the financial services industry. But there was one area that Robert hadn't seen much progress in. This was until Prudence Barry, a young woman from the western end of Tortola, piqued his interest, and as fate would have it, their love story would begin to unfold.
My recollection would be at a combined choir, Methodist choir rehearsal for a Whit Monday rally that back then and even now is an annual event within the Methodist Church. He was the choir director and I was one of the choir members from the Zion Hill Methodist Church attending that practice. That was, I guess, one of those first times that I really started getting to know who the person really is.
Well, first of all, we both are Methodists. So I've seen her, although she's from one end of the island. I've seen her around from time to time. When I was in the festival committee, one of my responsibilities sometimes be finding judges for the parade and things like so. And on a few occasions, I found this girl and put up what I think to be a judge, and so forth. And it became genuinely interested in her and so forth. Yeah, so that's why I met her.
Oh, outside of him being tall, handsome, black, and gifted, yes, he was, for me, at that time, someone who was very good at directing a choir and getting persons from various congregations to sing as one harmoniously. And it really was a good experience, you know, his leadership, his ability to relate down to earth with those choir members. And you knew that he was someone you can trust and give your all into the activity that you were doing, because he just sort of encouraged that kind of commitment then.
We got married on the 18th of August 2000, I think it was, in Providenciales, Turks and Caicos Islands. My concept of marriage was just the two of us go and get married, but it ended up being where I had we had the two of us, Randy Skelton and his wife, my wife's sister, and Kedrick Pickwick. That was the wedding party. That was the whole wedding.
Oh, it was a very small wedding, but it was just what we wanted at that time. And there was less than 10 of us, which would have included a photographer and everything else. Yeah, all the trappings of a big wedding, but it was just a few of us. And everything worked well.
Prudence Barry, now Prudence Mathavious, would indeed add to the safety of the house that Mathavious was building. Robert was now married and would continue his efforts to establish the Financial Services Commission, which ultimately became a reality.
2002, I transitioned secretly. I retired secretly and transitioned to the Financial Services Commission as Managing Director.
I think it was a very exciting time. I was new to the department and to the commission, but it was a time of promise. Mr. Mathavious had worked very hard along with numerous other people to bring the separation of the commission as a statutory body, as an independent regulator to fruition, and I think it was a very exciting time in the beginning.
There would have been a lot of legislation, development, and establishment of policies to make sure that the BVI become a financial services jurisdiction. And Mr. Mathavious would have been one of those persons, would have been the mastermind behind a lot of the legislation that was developed.
So it was that thing to be internationally. So the whole thing was we were bound by international standards. We were evaluated all the time, international standards. So we had to measure up. You know, there used to be an old cliche, thinking globally, acting locally. That was at the back of my head when we were forming the Financial Services Commission.
And after I left government and then joined the Financial Services Commission, we became even much more closer because I continued to do what I was doing in relation to financial services, which is preparing legislation in relation to financial services matters. And each time you could see the best coming out of Robert. Every time he came up with initiatives in terms of how we might develop the industry here in the British Virgin Islands. And he made sure at the same time that as part of what the Commission did, it kept abreast of developments both within the industry here but also internationally. And from that, he would always ask the question, what is there for us? What is there that we need to do? Robert was the type that always wanted to make sure that the BVI was always ahead of the game when it came to financial services matters. And it is no wonder that in many instances, Robert pushed for legislative reforms, including the need for introduction of new legislation in order for the jurisdiction not to be caught unawares that could create problems for the industry. So he was always a master in that, and he always believed in that.
So the regulatory side went with Robert, and he built the Financial Services Commission into a top drawer, world-class facility, a jurisdiction that everybody, it doesn't matter what you hear now about, all the what should I call it, the salacious stories that you hear circulating. The BVI's financial services are world class, and we have Robert to thank for where we have gotten to. And he's done it because he believes. He had another phrase, and that was, it's always better to be sitting at the table than being on the menu. So he always made sure that we were at the negotiating table, in short. So when it came to the FATF, Financial Action Task Force, the OECD, IOSCO, which is the Funds International, agency, and so on. His goal was for us to be there negotiating. And of course, if you're with these supranational organizations, you have to earn your seat at the table.
The BVI jurisdiction was benefiting greatly from the investments being made into developing the industry. The economy was booming, and Robert was receiving much of the credit. But as a leader, Robert would give all of this credit to the men and women who did the work to allow for the advancements the jurisdiction was receiving, reminding everyone that the team is only as strong as its leader.
I receive a number of accolades and so forth, which I did not get here alone. My staff, a number of other people, they're the ones who toiled, they're the unsung heroes of the success. I am standing on their shoulders. They're the winds beneath my wings. And too often, people make it look as if I have done this, I have done that. We all did this together. The government, the people, the industry, and my staff, whether it was at the Ministry of Finance, the Financial Services thing, and yes, the Financial Services Commission. But too often, people look at the smaller person and don't realize that they played an important role. So any accolades or so which may come my way, I only accept in a representative capacity because I represent that. I do it on their behalf. So it is on their behalf that I'm accepting anything that people says I deserve. And like I say, I am a soldier for the BVI. And the BVI is everything for me. If we lose the reputation, if we lose everything what we have. And so I'm as good as the team that I was with. And what is a leader without a team anyway? So my team deserves to every single bit, and they share in every single thing that I may have done.
I think as a leader, he was motivational. I think one of the things that he established early on for just about every employee was to give them a sense of the value of the industry to the territory and how they fit into that, why it was important for us as BV Islanders, why the industry was important to the government and to the wider community. And as a leader in terms of challenge, it's interesting that you would use that word, but he did that a lot. He challenged people to broaden their experience. He challenged people to broaden their education. And it's something that I think he did regularly.
I don't only think he wanted the best for everyone, but I know he wanted the best because he insisted on challenging each and every one of us in so many ways, whereby even though, as I mentioned, being the receptionist, he involved me in cabinet papers, being chairman of meetings. So he ensured that he pulled all the staff out of the comfort zone and really work with him to better their advancement. And for me, I would take it to another level whereby I would say, I did not see the potential in me as being the records manager within the office, but he saw that in an early stage, and I was awarded a scholarship where he personally put all the paperwork in and ensured that I attended the Regents College in the UK. And he's actually the reason for my advancement throughout the public service.
Mr. Mathavious has always been somebody who's very gentle, very willing to assist people in, achieving their goals. Very kind, very supportive. He's always been that type of person, very knowledgeable.
I can easily say his staff loved him. That was obvious. I mean, you knew it. You called the office, you spoke to them on the street or in the office, and his staff really loved him and looked up to him. So that's as close as I could say.
I think that it's interesting. He always seemed to have a number of young persons who look up to him. And I think just as he respected them, there was a mutual respect between them. And they would always seem to be a little pushing, a little empowering. I guess it's because of who he was, it's just his personality. One that accepts you as a person and who encouraged, although he always also had very high expectations of the individuals. It wasn't high expectations without the wish also to provide that support and help that was needed to ensure that young people excel at what they were doing. He was always willing to give them an opportunity, a chance to make a difference.
Mr. Mathavious believes in the people he works with. So over the years, I think we've seen him, how he's helped to develop others, but very engaging. I would say it was a joy to work with him.
I think he was a model civil servant in that, from what I had perceived, he was a civic-minded person. He was dedicated to the country, to the welfare of the people with whom he worked. He had an interest in the development and the growth of the people he supervised and so forth. This I discovered, from in various ways. And he was always a person who seemed to reach out in helping people to achieve their potential. There are some people who do not worry about that, but he seemed to have been one of those persons who would give his best to help others to achieve what they are trying to achieve.
As a man, Robert is that gentle human being that values every human being. If you look through his life and had the privilege of working with him and very closely, like I've been privileged to have, you see the humanity in him. Robert had been the one individual I can easily pick out as believing in young BV Islanders, that young BV Islanders should be helped to grow. They should be provided opportunities. And in doing so, he will come up with all possible scenarios as to how that could be done. So he's that kind of person I would call the man. Very gentle, very calm, very considerate, and at the same time very firm, but have a passion not only for financial services, but also for the development of BV Islanders.
He has a unique quality. He has a ability to spot talent, develop talent, and allow that talent to reach their full potential. There are many David Archers around, or many persons have been developed by Dr. Mathavious. I wouldn't name them now, but if you go throughout the BVI, not just locally, but of course even regionally, you will realize that persons have been touched by his greatness, by his advice, and his honest and wise counsel.
And I'll take you back to when the FSC now was the Financial Services Department. And Mathavious had about 4 professionals he brought in from different countries around the world. This is when financial services was fresh. And he brought them in. And you'll never believe, some of these persons were paid more than Mathavious at the time. But what he did, he strategically put young BV Islanders to understudy these persons. So mentorship, mentoring, understudying is big for him. And he received some flack for it because these persons were paid more than himself. But in his mind, it was bigger than that. He was able to develop a lot of young people in the territory, both male and female. And all of us today should be proud of where we are because of his mentorship. His mentorship may not be sitting down in a room and telling you exactly how to go about something, but he puts you in a position to be mentored. He puts you in a position where his hand is always on your next move. If it means that he has to make, as he aged actually, and would be required to make presentations around the world, when he could not attend these presentations, because of his mentorship program, he actually, not written down anywhere, but the way he went about it, he was able to select persons and say, you're going here to make this presentation for me, you're going there to make this presentation for me. Because at that point in time, he had already done his mentoring. He's already positioned you and had you poised to do these things.
In terms of his visionary leadership, we all have computers on our desks today, so we take it that they've always been there, but they were not. Mr. Mathavious is the driving force behind the establishment of the Information System Unit, as it was at the time ISU, which is now the Department of Information Technology. So if you'd speak to persons like Annabelle Skelton Malone, for example, she would tell you that he is a person who was instrumental in encouraging her to go away to study computers. So by the time she came back, she was basically ready to go on and head that department, that unit at the time, and eventually the department. So I think he saw potential in people and he tried to bring out the best in persons.
One of the lessons I've learned from him, humility. Robert is one of the humblest person that I know. He's humble. He's compassionate. He's kind, and you see it in so many different ways. I've seen it in the way that he treats other people. I've seen it in the way where I've seen him reach out to other people, but you would never know. Sometimes you know because the people tell you, but he will, if he does something for you, he will never say it to anybody. What he gives truly comes from the heart. And I think his honesty, he's just, what you see is what you get.
Robert is a very caring person about the territory on the whole, about this BVI that we live in. He always cares about it. And I think in his capacity as a person, as a person, he tried and he does everything he can to not only to enhance the territory, to enhance the people of this territory.
With that lesson, I could say Robert's strength of character. He did what he believed and he never really changed away from it.
Well, I think Mr. Mathavious knew that it was important to always surround yourself with persons who were like-minded but had varying views, and he was open to hearing the opinions of others, and also, being the leader that he was, he did not necessarily feel that it was on him to do everything, but he empowered those around him, to come up with ideas, to come up with solutions, and to be open to discussions and to go forward as a team. So I think he was the type of person that would not have necessarily thought, okay, this is my job to do, but to empower others to do it for the good of the community, of the territory.
Despite being called a leader, a visionary, and a pioneer, Robert believes that these titles are insignificant because for him, the greatest title is father.
But if someone to ask me what is my biggest accomplishment, it's a little girl named Jaden Aliyah Kiana Mathavious, who keeps me going all the time, who is my pride and joy.
He's like a close best friend because I'm not afraid to tell him things, and he always just take me up driving and we go on little dates and eat food, or we just dance and sing songs, and he just teach me how to cook sometimes.
She was born on the 10th of August 2006.
My father is a nice, funny, caring person, and he always likes to help everybody, even if he has something that he has to do. He always put you first.
Before I was sick, we did a number of things together, but since in my illness, we don't really do much things together. But we have a great relationship, and every now and then, she's going through some changes where she's no longer the little girl that I knew. She's now a teenager, 15 years, and it's interesting to see the child, to see the different conversations we have right now, to see the maturity in her and how she can attack certain things. She thinks very, very well.
I am grateful because he's old and sick, and I might not have a long time with him, so I cherish the moments I have with him.
There are various points in building a house that become more challenging than other moments. When those challenges arose and Robert couldn't lean on members of staff for support, he turned to his friends, the men and women he would have developed a special bond with over the years.
At this stage, my friendships must perhaps mean more to me than anything else.
To put it in words, I mean, Robert was one of my closest friends, and I think it's mutual. And those things are difficult to put in words. I read a poem that says that a friend may very well be the masterpiece of life. And that probably will sum it up for me in terms of our friendship. I really wouldn't be able to put it in much better words than that.
If you have Dr. Mathavious as a friend and you call him from anywhere in the world and you say, I'm in prison, he will not ask you why. He will ask you where. And he will appear in that place where you are. He values friendship. It takes a while, I think, for him to develop a good friendship. It certainly took us a while. And you sort of almost don't know that your friendship is developing with him. It is so slow growing and careful and deep. But once you reach a stage of friendship with him, you have a friend for life. And he will very much tell you what he thinks. I like to joke about Mr. Mathavious that he has a strange way of disciplining me. If I am having a conversation with him, for instance, and I say something that he didn't think I should say, he would tell me, yep. And I would know it's time to end that conversation and don't raise it again.
He's what you consider like he's a father figure. He's a mentor. He's been my boss. But he's been more than anything else my friend. I can go to him with anything. I can tell him anything. Just like I was telling you a few minutes ago, I could call Mathavious and say, Mathavious, I'm in trouble, you need to come now. He just needs to know where. He's not concerned what the trouble is. He knows we're gonna fix it. And that'll be his speech to me. We have to fix this. If it's my kids, if it's my wife, if it's my mother and my sister who's in the States, he's always willing to help me. Guidance. I could call Mathavious and ask Mathavious. Best joke. I called him one night and I said, Mathavious, my daughter here with some spelling words. And I'm stoked. And he was like, why are you stoked with your daughter's spelling words? I said, because they've asked her to spell 12th. And I'm sitting there like, 12th, T-W. And I continue, he's like, you know there's an F in it. I'm like, no, there ain't. I'm like, what you mean there's an F in it? He's like, there's an F in it. And when I look it up and there's an F and he's like, I told you, always count on me. And that's the friend I have in Mathavious. Someone I can always count on, literally, no matter what it is. And it'll never be a call I make to him and he's not willing to help. We call each other sometimes for no reason, just to check in. I call him sometimes and say, you forget you have a son. But that's the relationship we have.
Friendship, the value of a friend. Robert and I have been friends from June the 15th, 1975. I don't have to call Robert for weeks. When I call, it is as if I had called yesterday. And to me, what I find so very precious is that these young men, all of them could have been a child of mine. And that they took me as a friend, and the friendship has remained until now. And to me, that is what I find so lovely. And I thank them all the time for it.
And he's always been my friend. I'll always consider him to be my best friend. And he was the type also who was very open with you and very honest with you. But don't take that to mean you can get your way around however you want. The friendship is one thing, but when it came to work, Robert was very professional. And where he felt you are not doing what you're supposed to do, where he felt that you need to be told the truth, he never shied away from that. So he was always very honest, very open to you, and he's the kind of person who is not only a friend, but he's also a good advisor. Robert will advise you on what he thinks, in relation to you as a friend. And he will do all that is necessary also to guide you where he can. So I think in that, considering all of those combination of factors, it makes him an exceptional person, somebody I consider myself privileged to call a friend.
When I was in Atlanta in 2016 and had 3 brain surgeries, the second one did not go well. That was a difficult surgery. I didn't wake up for a while. And my daughter had to come home, the one who was with me, to put some things in order. When she came back, she brought me a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, with the verse of a hymn on it. He had written a verse of one of his favorite hymns on it. All praise to our redeeming Lord, who joins us by his grace and bids us each to each restored, together seek his face. And I knew what he was telling me. You are up here and I'm down here, but we're still joined.
Those of us who know Robert close will know that he's a man of impeccable integrity and a man of very deep-seated, immense faith. I mean, if you've had the opportunity to know him and interact with him, you know that his faith in Jesus Christ is the bedrock of his life. Not one of those who, will be speaking from the mountaintop about his faith. He just lives it. Almost. If Christianity, so to speak, is a way of life, I mean, he in a lot of ways not only embodies it, but personifies it in the way he lives.
It was about 6:30 in the morning. I was just in pre-op, getting ready to go into surgery, and he didn't pray, he didn't sing any hymns, or he didn't quote a verse of a hymn. He just put his hand on my arm, and he said, "You go with God." That to me was more powerful than a prayer. And then about 8 o'clock that evening, after I had gone back to my hospital room, one of the nurses came and she said, when I was coming on for my 7 o'clock shift, I met a big man leaving, and he asked me to tell you that he stayed with you until you fell asleep, but he left because he has to go to his doctor tomorrow. And I just burst into tears because he didn't have to come to Atlanta, but he knew that I was gone, I was ill, I was to have had a 3rd surgery, and he came so I could just see his face. And she told me that he said he was the last person I saw when I was going into surgery, and the first person I saw when I woke up in my hospital room. And that was true. Dr. Mathavious, he's not going to put on a show. I think he's incapable of that. He is just going to have his feet anchored on the ground, and the people who are important to him, he will care for in his own quiet, deep, meaningful way.
The process of building a house could perhaps be one of the most complex undertakings any individual can experience. Robert Mathavious built a house. But what's interesting about this house is the fact that it means many different things to many different people.
I see a concrete structure, well designed and stable, with love, integrity to all, and just unity within.
I see it as a house that has stood the test of time, and I trust that will continue to do so. I also see it as a beacon for BV Islanders now and for BV Islanders yet unborn.
I would say the house is built on a firm foundation. it's not like the wise and the foolish man as we have the parable in the Bible. I would say definitely he built a house on a rock. That whoever comes after Mr. Mathavious is able to take the baton and keep running. I see him as just one of our bright sons of the soil who has just laid an excellent foundation. So the house that he built should remain firm once the persons who are carrying on from him continue to uphold the standards and principles that he upheld.
It's the house that is full of opportunities, because that was what Robert was about. Robert believed in the development of financial services to create opportunities not only for the jurisdiction, but also for individuals. He saw financial services business, as something that this jurisdiction can leverage on. And at the same time, he felt very strongly that those who are within the industry to help drive the industry ought to be assisted in any way possible through legislative measures, through policy decisions and the like. And so effectively, what we are witnessing today here in the Virgin Islands is a house that not only Robert has built, but a house that is not a shell, a house that has been beefed up with all the necessary requirements that will continue to drive financial services business many, many, many years after Robert has retired.
I think it's a solid, well-built, beautiful, resilient house. I think it's a house that, as I have said, has been built on very strong foundations. It's a house that will withstand the test of times. It's a house that obviously will be battered now and then by hurricanes, by earthquakes, by disasters, but it is a house that is built on such a very solid foundation that it is a house that will last. I truly believe that.
Is 101 stories. That's the house, because at each floor represents greatness. Of course, his previous work within the government, being the financial secretary, the contributions he's made in financial services. But I do want to say, we don't really realize how great he is because we always see him around, and I'll share a story with you. I was able to witness Dr. Mathavious in Barbados at a conference. And when he walked in the room, everyone stopped. When he spoke, you could hear absolutely nothing besides him speaking. But what was amazing was when he finished, people lined up to talk to him. And guess what I did? I took his bag and I stood right next to him because I could not believe the man, the professional that I knew as being great, to see his greatness and to see others outside of his homeland hold him in such great esteem was something amazing to watch.
The house that Mathavious built is a very strong house. He built it with a lot of key professionals holding the right post, and he gives you the freedom to basically lead your unit, your team within the house that Mathavious built.
And I found the young man that I learned later was Robert Mathavious to be a leader even then. The other members of the committee look up to he and Ronnie Skelton. Other members who are today my very good friends, Ishmael Hodge, MB, Jamesy Tadman, Ronnie, all those fellows, and about 2 weeks later, they got some girls with them. But the leading voice or the leading person in the then festival committee, which we named the BVI Festival Committee 1975 Limited, was the young man who I learned was Robert Mathavious.
That house is built on some pillars: mentoring and modeling, humility, integrity, teamwork, family, loyalty to friends and to country. It is a house, I think, that is built on a firm foundation and will stand for a while. It's not like the house in the scripture that says it was built on sand, and when the storms came and the seas, it blew down. Mr. Mathavious does not do anything half-heartedly. Whatever he does, he puts his all into it. It doesn't appear so to you if you look at him function, but you know that he is digging deep to put a foundation wherever he is.
The house that Mathavious built, I'll describe it as solid, strong, and I would say that he's built a house of promise. I think that he and others have provided a good foundation. I think if nothing else, he has allowed a generation of Virgin Islanders and those who care about the BVI and about the success of BVI Financial Services to feel his commitment and to understand how deeply he believes that this industry is a benefit to the territory.
Robert is a very caring person about the territory on the whole, about this BVI that we live in.
Robert is easily one of the best brains this country has ever produced. I'll challenge anybody on that anytime, any place. Easily one of the brightest people I've ever met in my life. But, I mean, when you combine his academic brilliance with the social conscience that he had and has, and you just add, as almost like you add in dessert, somebody who has such a deep-seated faith in Jesus. I mean, destiny was always written. You know, the story had already been written. It was just a matter of it to evolve, so to speak. So, visionary might be even too soft a word to use in Robert's case. In fact, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, and I was saying that the BVI is so tremendously blessed to have had somebody like Robert to grace its shores, to be a son of the soil, but in a way in which he never used his talents, his gifts and his talents for personal advancement and for the purposes of creating great individual wealth. He used his gifts and talents for the public good. And that's why it stands out.
I would say his legacy is that he helped to create and guide the BVI future in the financial market, making us one of the leading jurisdictions in the world.
I see it as a house with a firm foundation, with structure, with room for expansion, a house that is visionary, a house that has benefited the British Virgin Islands economy tremendously. It has been that source within the economy that has served to make life better.
It will go back to our Bible verse as well. In building your house on a solid foundation, you build it on a rock, so that when the winds and the waves come in, it don't come crashing down. And over the years, we have had a lot of challenges, both from international initiatives, from data leaks and other things. But the house that he built has been able to withstand those challenges, over the years.
Most of our government's money, 60 cents out of every dollar,
comes from financial services. And that's because that's one of Robert's, he didn't do it alone, of course, but he was the person, he had broad shoulders, he has broad shoulders. And he was a person charged with making sure that the BVI was a top drawer jurisdiction up there with all of the offshore jurisdictions, the Jerseys, the Guernseys, the Caymans, the Bermudas, and so on. And so his legacy would be, I would say, would be the diversification of the economy, the whole entire economy of the British Virgin Islands away from tourism only into financial services.
I think I see the house as being strong, having been built on a firm foundation. And I say that from a spiritual standpoint. I think in Matthew, there would have been a time when Jesus would have spoken about building a house that was built on a rock, and how it wasn't being able to be blown away because of the foundation that it was built on. And I think that Mr. Mathavious would have been deeply entrenched in building the financial services sector on a very strong foundation. And now it is up to us to continue to build on it and to sustain it for generations to come.
What we can all agree on is securing the relevant permits, building the foundation, ensuring the walls, roof, beams, and columns are structurally sound, and selecting the right furniture, fixtures, and fittings will determine the quality of your structure. What are you going to build?
I would like to be remembered as a soldier in the army of the BVI, someone who gave his best for the BVI, someone who toiled tirelessly for the BVI, who championed BVI causes and BVI landers, who lived, breathed in every single thing, BVI. Sure, yes, some people say, but I was a regionalistic type of person, and so forth. But no, I would like to be that centurion on the wall fighting for the BVI, who will always be there. Maybe it's funny, but that my favorite animals are owls and eagles. Isn't it funny? Both of them have a vision, eyesight, that is non-compare. One in the day, one in the night. So I would like to be seen as this visionary who stood on the wall and who was there making sure that BVI strategically excels at all times.